Right. Hey, Zipianek, how you doing?
Hello, I'm good. How about you?
Doing well. Let me open up the agenda. I was just looking at this a little bit ago. Okay, great. Great. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I will go ahead and get started. I think Tom should be joining. I hope so, at least, because I'm very curious on some of the things like incubation. I know he was pinging me on Twitter this week around some of the stuff to do the incubation stuff. So, but we'll start and we'll see if he joins. Thanks everyone for joining. And we've got a few things to cover, and then obviously we can add some more agenda items as we need. And so maybe to start with, if we just want to go around and you can just quickly say your name, though I can see you all here in the Zoom attendee list. And then if there's anything you want me to add to the agenda as you add your name, then just let me know and we can just keep this up to date to make sure we cover all the topics. So if there's any, I guess, questions or features or status updates or whatever else you want to talk about, feel free to let us know. So first off, I'm Jeff. Good to meet you all. Work at Microsoft. And I had one FYI that I was going to pass along, which was a customer request that I got. In fact, we might actually even have some folks from the customer on the call. That I was just looking at around how we do activation and scaling, this interesting pattern they wanted to use that I'll just share as an FYI. I don't think there's any necessarily action required. And then Ahmed, I actually just sent you an email on this one too, but I was looking at the end-to-end tests to notice that the Q and Redis tests have been causing us some consternation. So I was just going to flag that and see if there's anything we can do to hopefully get this badge a little less sad on those end-to-end tests. But that's it. So those are already on the agenda. Zibinek, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name is Zbigniew. I'm from Red Hat. I don't have anything specific, but Tom won't join today because he told me that he's busy. But I can give brief update on the CNCF part.
Great. That'd be awesome. Thanks, Zbigniew. Ahmed, anything from you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ahmed. I haven't attended this meeting in a while. I've been sort of MIA from the project in a while, but just been interesting few months. But yeah, I'll be out the next 2 weeks too because I'll be out of town. But hopefully, starting second week of July, I should be able to start looking back at things. So sorry about that.
No worries. Good to see you. No problem. Shubham?
Hi, I'm Shubham. I'm work for NEC. There is no specific thing I have for this meeting.
Yep. No problem. Thanks for joining. And then Dennis.
Hey, good morning. Saving the new guy for last, I guess. Hey,
Yeah.
My name's Dennis. I work for a company called Solace. We're big into messaging, and I'm getting ready to implement a new scaler for our
Nice.
pub subsystem. So that's why I'm here, and might look to hit you guys up to make sure that I'm doing things correctly.
Great. That's great. Yeah, I'm looking at solace.com, I assume is the one. PubSub Plus event broker. Is this?
You got it.
Oh, that's great. Awesome. I love me some message brokers. So that's great. Yeah, we'll I'll add this here, Dennis, so we can make sure we chat about it. I imagine we'll jump through this agenda pretty quickly. So happy to answer any questions that you have. And regardless, just thanks so much for joining. Great to see you. Happy to help where we can.
Great.
Okay, so Zibinek, do you know what the latest is? I know there was some chatter on my Twitter DMs around Liz looking at the due diligence document. I know, yeah, Tom had a question around like our scalar governance that he was pinging me on that eternal pull request. I don't know if you have much more to add here or if you have a sense of how far we are.
Yeah, the document should be like complete, like at least from our side, or at least from what Liz requested and what she put in there, and she's going to present it in CNCF in some group. I forgot the name, but I think that from our side it should be okay. So now it's like the ball is on CNCF side, so everything is good from this side.
Okay, great. And I know last time we were, and I can't remember, I think Zbigniew, you were on that call, like at least my impression was some high degree of confidence that we were okay. As far as you know, like we're not, there's no like big concerns that they have or that Liz has throughout this. Yeah,
that's correct. It's correct. What she said, that the proposal looks good. So I think that we are on a good way.
Okay. Great. So that'll be exciting. And then, yeah, there has been, we talked about this one a few months ago around moving our Docker images from Docker Hub to GitHub Container Registry, which is now generally available. As I see Tom, I learned this from Tom's tweets, and then he obviously was looking to add this here. And it looks like, yeah, we've been doing this since the last release, which was about 2 weeks ago. So I assume this means we're now fully on the GitHub registry. I assume that's what, yep, you're good to go. And then the only other question I had on this, yeah, it's the parallel to Docker Hub.
Yeah, we are still doing this. So we are pushing parallel to Docker Hub and GitHub registry.
And we've communicated that we will potentially stop doing this once the GitHub registry is generally available. So I guess now the question is, do we want to stop doing it in parallel, or should we give it a few months just for good kicks and giggles, and then we just stop publishing? I care either way. I don't know, Zbigniew or Ahmed, if you have a preference.
I don't have either. Yeah, I'm fine with both. So
okay.
we can probably continue like maybe next 2 releases or something like that, and then we can omit Docker Hub.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, now that we have now that it is generally available, I wonder if, and I wonder if I can even, I haven't used this discussion thing, but more or less just saying like, now we have a date, and like, you know, as of whatever, August 31st, we don't plan to do any more to Docker Hub. So then it's less around, like, I had no idea that this registry was going to go GA this week. So if anyone was paying attention to this, but we could just say like, hey, we're going to do this until like August 31st. And then we at least have a date that we know we can stop. Okay. So I already mentioned, oh no. Okay. So this is the one that I'll flag, and I know the customer was saying they were going to plan on joining the stand-up, but it doesn't look like they did, which is fine. So I won't share their name because I don't know how public they want it to be that they're looking at using KEDA, but I got looped into an Azure engagement this week, and there's a customer looking to build out a bunch of stuff on Kubernetes, running some Java Spring apps, and they're looking to use KEDA. Purely an FYI on this pattern, because I thought it was interesting. The way that their logic works, and I didn't even get a chance to dig into it deeply, is they have 2 queues, QA and QB. And what they were asking for a way to do was, we want to activate our container and scale them up from 0 when QA has a message. But the metric that we want to drive scaling of is the messages in QB. And so they're like, is there a way we can mix and match and say like, use QA to decide if we should be active, like scaled to 0 or not, and then use QB if there's something in QA to actually decide how many messages we need. And I'm curious on the like, what's the actual business logic that's driving that? But my initial answer to them was like, I think you have 2 potential options. One is you create a GitHub issue with a potential design and make a case for like, should this be a KEDA feature? Like, should there be something in the scaled object spec that lets you specify like activation scalar and metric scalar and have those potentially be disjointed? I was like, I don't know what the general thinking will be. It seems kind of niche and maybe not general purpose, but like that's one option. That's like the other one is you could create an external scalar with your own custom logic and more or less create like go fork the Q scalar. Like if it's RabbitMQ, like grab the RabbitMQ scalar and just fork it to have the ability to let you specify like QA and QB and then have the logic do what you want. And then you just use this as your own custom scalar and KEDA will do what you want, because when it asks for metrics, you'll return those. That was the initial guidance I gave. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts if there's better ways of doing it, or even if the guidance that I gave might have been misguided. But figured I'd be like, yeah, I'll share this with the group to see if anyone has heard anything like this before or wants to correct some recommendation that I might have given them. So any thoughts?
I think that the recommendation that you gave them is correct. So I would start with the external scalar for sure. And maybe if there's a demand or something like that, so it could be included into the core. But I don't see a way how can we achieve this with the current implementation. Even if they implement, even if they define two scalars, two triggers in scaled object, it won't work. Yeah, it won't work. Yeah.
Why isn't it like if you define two Q triggers for two different queues, wouldn't that give them the desired result? Like
it will give them or HPA selects the greatest number for the actual scaling.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's one queue that just manages activation. So if there's a message on it, the deployment gets activated. But and then there's another queue that you do the scaling based on the number of messages that's in it. So if you just put the two as two different triggers, I feel like the final result is that HBA that has both numbers, and then HBA will scale based on the highest of them. And activation.
And I need to get more clarification here, but the scenario, at least that I've painted in my mind of like what they're potentially trying to do is like throughout the day, QB is getting a bunch of work items that they just want to batch up, like not do anything with, like they just want QP to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then they drop a message in QA, which is more or less like, go drain QB. It's kind of like it almost seems like they're maybe just doing some batch processing. That's kind of how I've interpreted it. So once they get the go fight signal from QA, then they're like, go drain QB as fast as you can. So if they did two scalars, then they'd be continually training QB. Now, that said, even if they're doing what I described, even with an external scalar, I still like what happens to the one message on QA once that thing gets processed. Like you might scale back down to 0 again before QB is finished.
If it's an external scalar, then yeah, they can probably do it because they have the option of returning what to return as metrics and what to return as active state. So essentially, is active will only look at the activation queue, and the get metrics will be like the get metrics will have to look at both, I guess, to know if it's currently active or not, and then return the correct number of messages.
Yeah, and that I get, and I don't know, like imagine a world where like they say QA is the is active and QB is the get metrics. Let's say there's one message in QA, so it becomes active, and then QA is empty again. And so now is active is 0, but it's already activated. Like the container's activated at this point. Are those going to fight each other now? Like, will it not ask is active again until get metrics goes all the way down to 0? Would they potentially need to code in some logic here to make sure that you need this thing to be active until whatever you decide using your logic if it shouldn't be active anymore?
It'll keep calling is active, and then that's controlled by the cooldown period. So if they return false from is active, it's just going to keep it around until the cooldown period is over, and then it's going to scale it to 0, even if HBA still has metrics. So even if HBA still
Makes
has
sense.
numbers, but is active is returning false and it has been past the cooldown period, it will scale it back to 0.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so yeah, I'm gonna try to learn more, and if it is in fact like some batch processing thing, that might actually be like whether the approach that they've come up with of having 2 queues, I could see that being something that would be an interesting pattern to solve for, which is the like, I want you to listen onto this queue or this stream. I guess we've heard like this threshold thing before where people are like, don't actually activate until my stream has 1,000 messages. And once it crosses 1,000, then I want you to wake up. But anything less than 1,000, like it's not worth it. That's a request I've gotten a few times before. Maybe in this world, if we define a threshold, the threshold could be based on like time or some other signal as well, to be like, when is the threshold crossed? And in their mind, again, I'm making a lot of assumptions here, but they're saying the threshold is crossed when we give you the signal, and we're going to give you the signal by dropping a queue message. But that pattern of like a threshold is maybe more general purpose. No idea how or if we'd be able to solve it, but yeah, it's interesting. I'm always fascinated by how people are using KEDA or using just things in general to solve some of these more complex patterns. So anyway.
That's cool. That's cool. Just want to add that regarding the threshold scenario, I've just recently got some ask from some user, and he may actually be willing to contribute this. I cannot find the correct. I will find the correct issue for this. So this is probably something that we can have in the near future.
Yeah, and I think this was the one, at least that I think I remember looking at. I'll paste this in chat for you as well as Zibianek, but I think this was the one I remember talking about last year around this threshold one. Whether this is the right design, no idea. But I remember having some good conversations about this one. Okay, and then the only other one, I already flagged it, which is just like, hey, end-to-end tests. I don't know, Zibianek, if you have anything else to add here. It doesn't, yeah, it looks like it's just, and I poked through 2 of them, and both times, let me just grab a random one here. It seemed like it was the Q and Redis scalers that were saying it wasn't happy. But anyway.
I can take a look at them. I mean, they require frequent just.
Yeah. I was trying to do the locally, like to find the issue, but I wasn't successful. So it's probably some kind of timeout. So if you can look at the cluster, you will see probably what's the problem. But generally, is the cluster Redis cluster and Azure one. I'm not sure which one.
Yeah, it looks like it on this one, the Redis or the Q one worked, but the Redis one was unhappy.
But the Q one is more frequent. Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's it on the agenda. Dennis, you mentioned you were going to potentially start looking at a Solus scaler. I think that sounds great. I don't know, Zibianek or Ahmed, if you have any top level things, or Dennis, if you have any big questions. I know we've got some docs here on getting started with curating scalers and some examples here, which is a good starting point, whether you've seen this or not in the contributing file. But yeah, Dennis, any kind of questions that you've been pondering on as you think about contributing a scaler for Solus?
I'm actually pretty far along with it. I mean, I have
Nice.
I have a prototype set up, and it's it's functioning pretty much as desired. So yeah, have some kinks to work out maybe, but nothing huge. I do have a couple of questions though. I mean, one is I found some, I guess, documentation for a push scaler, which is something that we would be interested in, where instead of polling, or maybe in addition to polling, we would actually be able to activate on events. I did not find a lot of documentation about that though. There's not a lot of information, and if I look at the which document is it? Like one of these contributing docs, or creating a scalar. I mean, there's nothing really about creating a push scalar. So can you tell me, is that something that others have used? I mean, I looked at a few examples. I think I looked at Rabbit, Kafka, and IBM MQ, and I didn't see that they had anything like that. So I was wondering, but I didn't go through every single scalar and try to figure that out. I'm just wondering, if you guys, having worked with this for some time, do you have any feedback on is that ready for prime time, or how are we doing with that? Is that something that I should pursue at this point?
Yes, so external scalars, the only built-in example of them is push scalars. The only built-in example of them is the external scalar, which basically was added to allow push over gRPC. So when you connect externally, the gRPC stream could just push the is active state instead of just having it polling based. And the only example using it now is the HTTP add-on, I think.
Okay.
Which is an external scalar. But yeah, there's no reason not to have another built-in push scalar as well, if that's something that works for you. But so far, we haven't needed any internal ones other than the basic support for gRPC scalars, which we call external scalar. Yeah.
All right. So does that poll, is the intent then to have it work in conjunction with polling?
No, sorry. So if you implement yes, I think it works in conjunction with polling. So basically, both are going to be called. Is active is going to be called, and that's going to scale the deployment. But also, it supports a channel in Go essentially, or a stream in gRPC that allows you to push an is active, and immediately at that time, it's going to activate.
Okay. All right. So they both work, I mean, theoretically together. So I mean, if I didn't want polling, I mean, is there a way to shut that off, or is that just something that I would have to? Polling is going to calls inactive, right? Or is active?
Polling calls is active. Yeah.
All right. And another question I had actually is the sequence of events is, okay, so on every polling cycle, first you call is active for each scalar, and then you call get metrics for each scalar. Is that accurate?
No, so both actually happen in two different processes. So is active happens in the operator, and get metrics happens on the API server. Get metrics is called by HPA directly, not by any of our code.
I see.
So it's sort of orthogonal to is active.
Yeah, this is just for the activation. So basically from scaling from 0 to 1, and then HPA does the polling for metrics directly through the metrics server.
All right. Part of the reason why I'm asking that is because get metrics, the way it's defined, at least the way it looks like it's defined, is it's going to call get metrics one time for each named metric that you have, right? So if I have a named, if I have two named metrics, I mean, and we're looking at using two metrics off the bat. So first we have, the queue depth, or the queue length, or however, message count on a queue, and the other is spool usage, which is the amount of disk space that is actually being consumed by a queue if it's a guaranteed messaging. So in those two situations, I mean, you have two different reasons that you might want to scale. One for performance, one for to protect the health of the broker. But you might want to have both of them active at the same time. Now, if I'm going to call, or if I'm going to use get metrics, I'm going to do two calls to my API every single time that I'm polling versus one time, right? Because I'm going to do get metrics. I'm going to look up the one particular value for queue depth. I'm going to call get metrics again, and I'm going to get the spool usage space. So I was hoping that I would be able to call is active, effectively it's going to return both metrics back, cache that, and then when it does call get metrics, it would just, instead of calling the API again, it would simply, I would just use the cached values. So the way that get metrics is defined, it's not actually get metrics, it's get metric, that you're calling multiple times. So that's maybe a little bit confusing. It's not terribly confusing, but you get the idea. I was just wondering, is there a way or some mechanism that I can use that would allow me to effectively call both, call it once, cache those metrics, and then use that when it's actually calling the get metrics. And I was hoping that, if it was, that if the is active was always called, before the get metrics, then that would work. But if that's not the case, then I don't really have a good mechanism to use. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, what I'm trying to do is just minimize any kind of performance on hit on the broker, because I'm calling the API every single time that I'm looking to establish the metrics for a particular queue. Now, I mean, if you're doing one queue or just a handful, that's no problem. But if I have hundreds or thousands of deployments, just hammering that API every pulse cycle, in an uncontrolled fashion, maybe not be, might not be the best way to do it. So, yeah, and that's why we can look at using the push. But I was just wondering if there's some other method that I could use. Do you guys understand what the problem is, or maybe just what my design concern is?
Yes, yeah. I was looking at the code to kind of see. I think info.metric. Yeah, I was trying to see if we actually have, because essentially the way you should think of this get metrics API is a REST API for HPA from Kubernetes itself. We define a bunch of metrics there, and then HPA queries them from us every now and then. I'm trying to see if we actually, when we get the request for the query, if we get all the metrics that it wants or just one by one. But as far as I can tell, we just get one.
Yeah, well, I figured it was one because it's actually passing the name of the metric.
Yeah.
So if it's passing the name of the metric, it has to be one at a time.
Yeah, but the name of the metric is basically, or the metric that you are passing to HPA is basically the metric that you define. So, so in the get metric, you can define your own metric that will contain both values, like both. So in the get metric, you will do the calculation from both calls, from the two of that you mentioned before, and basically store it under some custom metric name, and this is just how HPA will do the calculation. Do you know what I mean?
I'm not sure that I do. So for each.
So basically, so you mentioned that you would like to have two ways how to scale the deployment from your scaler,
right?
And so you can in the get metric function, you can basically call both endpoints at the same time, and based on that values, you can create your own metric that will be passed to HPA. So it will be just one number from two numbers.
Oh, I see. You mean like sum the two numbers, for example, and
sum it, or do some kind of logic on them that you would like to have, and just push it to HPA. So it will operate just with one value.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're going to call. When I call the endpoint, to retrieve the metrics from from the actual broker itself, I'm only going to call. I'm going to call it once, and both values actually come back on one call, right? I don't think I can define an amalgam type metric. I think is where you're going, like sort of make these metrics,
normalize the scale,
blend them, blend them into one. So I mean, I might be able. I'm looking at it now. I mean, the metric spec list is actually two values. I mean, or it's a list. I mean, I could try to return both in one call and see how that works. But no, I don't think I could actually like blend those metrics into one scalable value.
Okay. Just bear in mind that basically, if you set multiple metrics to HPA, the HPA will always select the greatest value. So basically,
okay.
This is it is not doing some kind of operation. It is just selecting the greatest number for the actual target, which is being like used for calculation on the target method. Because
Okay. All right.
Yeah, the other thing I was gonna maybe suggest is you could always cache in the scalar itself. So the same scalar object is called, like when we call get metrics multiple times with different metric names.
Mhm.
Oh no, actually they get created every time. Never mind. Sorry.
All right, so well, let me ask you this. So when HPA is calling into the scalar, and the get the get metrics gets called, is it would it go through the list of all available metrics? It's sort of like a burst at one time, or would it is it more or less random or stochastic in terms of like when they get called?
I'm not
So
sure
again-
if I follow the question. Basically, the way how HPA is getting the metrics is basically it is requesting a metric for specific objects in the namespace based on labels. So it is like selecting and then that is just basically calling the metric that belongs to the specific object.
Okay, so if I have one scaled object, right, and I have a trigger on it and it's got 3 metrics, it would call, each those metrics, boom, 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 1, 2, 3, as opposed to spreading that out over a period of time.
Okay, so are you talking about one scale object with 3 scalars or multiple scalars, or one scalar?
One scalar.
Okay, so in this one scalar, you just need to return the value from the getMetrics call. It is not asking for, because the HPA doesn't know the implementation details of your of your metrics and all the stuff. It is just requesting the metric value from the specific function.
Okay, but if I have 3 different metrics defined for one scalar, so would it call, I mean, it's going to call get metrics, but it's going to call it 3 times, right? Once for each named metric that I have defined inside of that one scalar. So I'm just wondering if that happens as a burst, or is it or is it more, can I not really predict the timing of when they're going to get called?
I'm not sure. We will need to check the HPA implementation. Because this is solely on the HPA level. But interesting question, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I mean, I think, this is just, it's an engineering problem. It's something that I can work out. It's just if you have multiple metrics, it's a little it's not abundantly clear, what the best way to do this efficiently is. So that's really all it is. I mean, I can get it to work, and then make some observations over time, and then refine it. So that's probably what I'll end up doing.
Yeah, because actually this is the first scalar that would like to return multiple metrics. All scalars that we have are returning just one metric for each scalar.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed. I mean, so like, for example, with like IBM and Rabbit, I mean, they're all just looking at Q depth. So, our engineers, or, a couple of the architects think it'd be a really good idea if we were able to return back, and scale on the spool size as well.
Yeah. So the other option is basically, in this case, in one scale object, you can define like 2 types of your scalar, and one type of the scalar will scale based on the Q, and the second will scale based on the other value. So you will have 2 scalars in one scaled object, and HPA will do the thing as I told you. So it will select the greatest number. This is the use case that is being used for Rabbit, if I'm not mistaken. There are 2 possibilities how to define the threshold, and this is basically the use case. So
yeah, Rabbit is it's an either or. It's an either or. Yeah, they do one type or the other type.
But you can define both types in one scale object, both types. So in this case, then HPA will select the greatest number. So this is the very similar use case, I would say. Anyway, if you have any further questions, you can reach us on Kubernetes Slack on KEDA channel.
Yep, I joined yesterday, I think.
Cool. And by the way, do you plan to implement end-to-end tests? Because this is something that we are starting to push forward. So basically, for each scaler, we requires users to implement end-to-end.
End-to-end tests, I don't know that I did. And by that, I mean, no, I did not. So.
Just something that it's basically, it should be something that you will deploy scaled object with the scaler of that you create, and just check that it is actually scaling based on some numbers. Nothing complex. Just checking the basic functionality.
Okay, so is that something that, I mean, for example, I mean, I'm putting the unit tests into the code. Is it just evidence of testing, or is it actually just something that needs to be deployable? When you talk about end-to-end testing.
Something that's need to be deployable. So if you look at the tests directory in KEDA repository, you will see.
Scalars. Okay. Yeah. All right. I got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they have HTTP and they have AMQP. I'm looking at Rabbit. I see. Okay. And all right. Well, okay. I'll have to look at this because this is not clear to me, because this if you're going to end-to-end test, I mean, you actually have to have the technology deployed in order to test against it, right?
Yeah, or connect to some public cloud or to some service.
Okay. All right. I can make that happen.
Cool.
Yeah, we do actually have a public, Solus does have a public cloud offering, so we can set up a public instance and have it bounce off of that.
That's cool. Just some basic, just some smoke test that actually checks that the trigger is working. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Very good.
Awesome. Thanks, Dennis, for joining in. Good questions. Okay, so that's all we had on the agenda. Anything else anyone wants to cover before we sign off for the week? Great. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and post this recording to YouTube once it's finished processing. Thanks everyone for joining. And as Zbigniew said, the Slack channel is a great place to reach out as well. So thanks everyone. Chat later.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.